70s, for just about everybody in psychology was believing that emotion was arousal, and that the underlying physiology was the same, and it was just what you told yourself or what the situation you were in suggested to you that determined the emotions. There's a classic experiments by Schachter where they gave people some amphetamine back in the day before iPhones.
Yeah.
And they put some of them in situations where they would interpret it as being anger, and others in situations where they would interpret it as being excitement, and they got very different. And this kind of thing still kind of work, but people were then arguing that, like whether you were angry or afraid or aroused or excited would just depend on your cognitive interpretation. And Levinson has gone into really psychophysiological profiles. But it's very, very difficult to, bordering on impossible, to tell anything very specific about emotion from physiological measures, whether you're talking about psychophys or neuroscience. There are definitely correspondences and correlations, but there's also a fair amount of kind of subjective independence. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking that maybe with the older people, they're starting out with a subnormal finger temperature, perhaps due to poor circulation compared to the younger baseline finger temperature. And then maybe it has to jump up, has to make that change to get up to an optimum.
Yeah, you could be in a very different place.
It doesn't really say, it doesn't compare the baseline temperature, does it?
No, they're kind of taking the baseline out of this the way that they analyze it. And there are also different statistical ways of doing that than the way that they did it. But yeah.
Also, like in older adults, it might be that it just takes longer for the older adults to come back to homeostatic temperatures.
Probably true, but they're not actually kind of looking at that in this particular study. Diane Woodruff did a review of particularly like anxiety and fear kinds of arousal kinds of stimuli, and this is exactly what she found is that older adults both took longer to react and took longer to come back to homeostasis under conditions. And I think she also had some non-human animal results in that too. And honestly, of the different physiological, they highlighted this in their graphs because of the interaction effect that they found. Of the different physiological measures, I'd probably put the least emphasis on finger temperature as a good indicator. Heart rate's better, respiratory rate's better. They do a kind of general, how much you're shifting around, kind of response is better. Actually, if you're really interested in discrete emotion detection and so forth, Paul Ekman's work on analyzing minute facial cues, he's actually one of the contributing authors in this paper too, is probably a much better indicator than either psychophys or neuroscience at this point. There's a TV show on now on Fox that's based on Ekman's work, and he's also been highlighted in several, his work, not he himself, has been highlighted in several Law and Order episodes over the last several years. He's gotten a lot of mileage out of this very fine-tuned coding of what muscle groups in your face change and in what way with different emotional states. And they actually it's interesting, the way that they got into this is they started with method actors who can do this and learn to do this. And so, because they needed people who could do it, like on purpose. And then they looked at it with other kinds of people. And it's probably like one of the best systems for detecting when people are learning right now.
Yeah. So is that like when they say if you look a certain way, when someone asks you a question, you're lying? Is he the person?
It's
much more sophisticated than that.
Yeah. It's like there's like muscle groups all over your face.
What was his name again?
Ekman, E-K-M-A-N, I think. It's up at Stanford. Apropos of nothing much, but it's an interesting story. I saw him at the Association for Psychological Science meetings. One of the things they do is inside the psychologist studio, and they get one of the really senior giant figures in psychological science and do this kind of interview that's like the show that used to be on Bravo. You're inside the actor's studio. And I was at one a few years ago. They interviewed Ekman, and they also showed like some of the Law and Order clips. The talk show hadn't been developed yet. It was part of introducing him. It turned out to be the first time he had seen them. I'm not sure anybody. I think somebody had told him about it. He said he had heard about it, but he said he doesn't watch TV, so he'd never actually seen them. But one of the stories that he was telling was that he got interested in studying emotion because he has an uncontrollable temper. And that this had been a problem for him like all of his adult life. And in the last 5 to 10 years or so, a lot of the emotion, the Dalai Lama has invited like top emotion researchers to meet with the monks and talk about emotion and talk about Western science and Eastern approaches to understanding psychology. And Ekman, who described himself as not having been a believer in anything at all, says that when he shook the Dalai Lama's hand, he had this tremendous emotional experience and sense of peace from the Dalai Lama, and has not had any problems with explosive anger ever since. It's interesting to listen to this kind of thing. Is emotion another trend in emotion and aging, and part of the history is the idea that emotion might become more complicated with age. And the original research on this was looking at life satisfaction, affect balance kind of measures. The Bradburn affect balance measure can be scored in a way that gives you both a negative affect and a positive affect, and then you can look at the difference between the two as a way of getting a sense of balance. And in some early analyses of these with nationwide samples, people noticed that older adults tended to score less highly both on positive affect and on negative affect. And along with some other data that was available at the time, this led Richard Schultz, among others, to suggest in the early 80s, I think it was, that older adults might actually have a more mixed experience of emotion. And when you're young and you haven't had so much experience of life, it's natural that any given experience will evoke a stronger and purer emotional reaction. So the first time something really positive happens to you, like the first time you fall in love, it's an intense happy reaction. You know it's going to last forever and everything's going to be wonderful forever. And the first time you break up, it's miserable, and you know that you're never going to be in love again, and that life is going to be miserable. And then as you get older, you realize that experience and history becomes more complex, and you can have both positive and negatively valence reactions to the same experience at the same time. Laura Carstensen, who's one of the premier emotion theorists now, sometimes describes this as poignancy. And Labuvi Adif, one of whose more recent papers you have here, has advanced this actually fairly complex argument about the development of both cognitive and emotional complexity in adult development. I felt much better about my own level of intelligence a few years ago. Gisela got the Distinguished Contribution Award from the Division of Adult Development and Aging, the American Psych Association.